Has a Google.
And welcome. We are virtually connecting from Domains 19. We'll start with the on-site folks. And Autumn, maybe you can start.
Hey, I can hear you now.
Things off.
Hey everyone, my name is Autumn Keynes. I'm an instructional designer at the University of Michigan Dearborn. I'm incredibly happy to be here at the Domains 19 conference with these amazing thinkers and speakers. And I'll let them introduce themselves when we start.
Hi, I'm Tim Moon. I'm a writer and novelist.
Hi, I'm Sava. I'm a, I don't know what I am. I do stuff. Hi.
I'm Chris, and I yell at people on the internet.
Hi, I'm Ed, and I teach at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
And we have a couple of people.
This is my first time.
Welcome. Thank you so much. We have a couple of people. I'm just gonna, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Joe. I am the head of a teaching and learning center. Hey, Laura.
I'm just tweeting.
You're just tweeting? Okay. Laura's not really here. Pay no attention.
Thank you so much. We'll start with some of the virtual folks, Maha, Matt, and Maureen in that order, and then we'll continue.
Hi, I'm Maha Bali from the American University in Cairo, and I'm the co-director of Virtually Connecting along with Autumn, Helen, and Rebecca and Chris who aren't here. And I think actually Sava and Tim this is your first virtual connecting. Like we've met online, but it's your first virtually.
They said, come in this room, there's a laptop.
We've seen laptops before.
Very trusting.
Okay, I'm looking forward to
it. Yeah, I was part of this one.
Were you on site or were you virtual though?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I can't remember either.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Matt Crossland. I am a researcher at the Link Research Lab in the University of Texas at Arlington, also an instructor with the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley and their online master's degree in educational technology. Hello, everyone.
Hi, I'm Maureen Glenn. I'm a senior e-learning designer with Trent University, which is in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada.
Yay, Ontario. Go Raptors.
Michael, and then Themba.
Good morning, I'm Michael Berman, and I hang out at the California State University and look for ways to be useful.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Themba. I work in Yale University Libraries. Hello, hello.
Hi, oh my God. Oh my God, long time Twitter.
Yeah, that's right.
And finally, I'm Helen DeWard. I'm your virtual connecting buddy from afar. Happy that you're all gathering together. We won't take too much of your time, but we'd love to hear what's happening. Some vibes and some conversations from the hallways and byways of the conference.
Yeah. Well, okay. Since no one will, so I really like Martin's talk today. It was like round 2 of Scared Straight.
Yeah.
The surveillance files. So it was really, and he's putting up most of his materials, almost all of his materials.
Yeah, and a little blog to go.
Yeah, and a blog post online. So it was great. That's what I'll say.
I'm curious about how it looked from the virtual side. Have people been following along? I know it wasn't live streamed, but were people able to get the gist of Martin's keynote? Because if not, we can kind of recap it a little bit, as it was really powerful.
Actually, if you could recap, the tweets didn't do it justice.
You volunteered.
I was volunteering you.
I wasn't there.
Well, it was Minority Report theme. If you haven't seen Minority Report, it is a movie, a science fiction movie based in the future that deals with a lot of surveillance, especially around policing and advertising, which is two of the things that he pulled upon. And I
Predictive policing.
Predictive policing. Right. Yes, that's the big part.
Something's going to happen, and then
right? Because so you haven't even committed the crime yet. Right, but we know that you're going to. We know that you're thinking about it. So we're going to go ahead and just jump in there and arrest you now.
Yeah, I think the film is interesting because it combines. It doesn't tell you that there's tech involved, and it's like three people who can sense stuff. But it's combined that with like facial recognition, and that was kind of the thrust of Martin's talk about facial recognition and how it's used and what are the databases. And he kind of showed a couple of cool things and a couple of cool ways in which we can kind of inject our faces into things, but also talked about like the downside of that in terms of like how facial recognition is being used by various institutions / governments / companies to control and learn how to control and exclude and include people in various different good, bad, terrible, awful things. I said good first.
I actually thought you had a really neat question there at the end.
Yeah.
Where you were asking, so what do we do about the fact that this is shiny and cool and we like it and we want to like it, but it's also got all of these downsides, which made me think that I think maybe because it's shiny and cool, it feels to me like our first reaction is frequently, therefore we should regulate the shiny and cool. And it almost feels like there's a whole step even further back into context to say, this is about policing generally, and this is about non-police surveillance. This is about how people are treated in stores. This is about how we sell stuff, and everybody likes to draw a paycheck. So I don't, everybody's got to make rent. I don't want to slam that too hard, but I feel like that's part of the knee jerk is that this is a technology problem. We need either a regulatory solution to technology, or we need a new technology solution, which will surely make things better. I don't know why she swallowed the fly.
We had a great example in the UK of when the police set up their scanners and scanned people as they were walking down the street, and one person tried to cover his face, and they ended up writing him a ticket for being disruptive and for being disobedient. And I think that was kind of telling is, we are there in lots of ways.
And he even said it was a cold day. Yeah. It was a cold day, and he pulled his collar up over his face, and he was very clear that he was doing it because they had big signs, you're going to have a picture of your face taken here. But I mean, that was even on top of it all. It was like he's not just even covering up his face, like it's actually a cold day.
I think one of the issues, if the problem is that people are finding this stuff shiny and cool, is one of the social issues is why are people finding this stuff shiny? We live in a time, I think, where we don't have a very strong imagination about the future for very good reason. A lot of the predictions for the future are incredibly dire, especially when it comes to climate change. So people are very, very intoxicated by convenience. They're very intoxicated by automation, robots, your phone talking to you. It gives you a feeling, there's that old cliche about, it's the future, where's my jetpack? Well, you haven't got a jetpack, but you've got a computer in your pocket that answers to your every whim, And so we've been sold this technology as an exciting future. And I think we should be looking at why and how that happens and finding alternative exciting futures, ones where we don't all die because the crops fail or something like that, and finding ways to be excited about that rather than this kind of consumer gadgets.
And also, like when we were talking earlier during the screening, it's like it's so convenient for us that we don't feel compelled to check it because it hasn't harmed us yet. Right? By the time it harms us, we're sitting in this room. We're pretty safe from some of this stuff. Chris is not as safe as some of the other people in this room, but we still have ways in which that this is not affecting us to as dire a case as some cases. But once it starts hurting the people who think it's not going to hurt them, it's going to be.
Yeah.
Well, and also from which point of view are you looking at the thing? So remember, one of the videos Seva produced was about someone who gets denied her medication because they figure out something from social media that she's done that's not compliant. And I was watching this with my husband, who's a doctor, but he only saw it from the point of view of being a medical doctor. He's like, yeah, she's not compliant. She could hurt herself, therefore it's okay to deny her the medication.
Yeah.
Like, what if you were the patient? How would you feel? You're like, put yourself in that person's shoes. Just because you have data, because the data is there, doesn't mean it's not unethical to use it. Doesn't mean that there might be bad consequences. Doesn't mean that it's a black and white thing.
Exactly, and we brought that up a couple of times. Like people's reaction to it is often like, "But she did the wrong thing, so that's right?" And that's not how it is. We're so giving into these rules that these technologies have placed upon us. And then that's the thing. Like at the other film, at the end, the police come and are involved, right? So it's like this private thing that then becomes a crime that then involves like the larger infrastructure of oppression.
So I have a brief question. It seemed like, can you hear me, first of all?
Yes, lovely.
It seemed like based on the stream that part of it was around the legality and kind of what laws do and don't exist to accommodate for that. And I'm wondering, basically given the example in the UK of the person getting a ticket, I mean, they're already selling like fake eyes and fake mustaches and, kind of essentially makeup or really mini prosthetics that change the way your face looks. Would that be breaking the law? And if so, it reminds me of, and I don't want to get into kind of current American politics, but there was this notion that a lot of the reason why they're just stalling is because the literal definition of subpoena means to be under penalty. But if you're not worried about that penalty, then being subpoenaed doesn't matter, right? And so I'm wondering if there's some notion of, so what if we can say, okay, you can't fake the system, as it were, as it relates to education. I mean, that's the student's entire kind of academic process is captured in all of these electronics. I would hope that they have some recourse.
Yeah, this comes up in a lot of ways. I mean, in our presentation, we talked about sort of the arms race between, I mean, it was in one line, but the arms race between students and ed tech companies, how students might resist or hack the technology. But also, Martin brought it up in discussing the burqa bans. Which is that he said that they're often that is the thing that gets the most press, but they're overall bans against any face covering in a lot of countries. And so that, and I mean, he didn't directly say this, but he implied that part of that was to kind of pave the way for facial recognition technologies.
I mean, I worked in retail in the early 90s, and we had a policy if someone came in wearing like a motorcycle helmet, you had to go up to them immediately and tell them to take it off. And that was just within the store. We didn't have any jurisdiction outside the store, but we were meant to tell people to leave, either take face coverings off or leave the store.
There's an example in, I think, Vancouver a few years ago during the G20, one of the G things where all the rich countries get together. But because of the protests and everything, a lot of protesters wore face coverings and everything, and they weren't allowed to. So there is like precedent where that has been used, and it's weird because all of the overlaps between culture, religion, protest, I mean, all of it is oppression in some ways, right? Or controlling people in that way. So yeah. And
I personally am really interested. I mean, people have probably seen like different kind of makeup sort of articulations can fool facial rec. So I'm always like, hey, let's make these things more popular, and I don't know. And again, Martin, I asked a question at the end to Martin about this, and he again, and this is speculative, but that there may become a point where even things like that, like sort of strange makeup and things like that become prohibited.
Well, here's the thing. We use like Snapchat filters and stuff like that where we're putting our faces with that stuff. So I imagine that it's very easy to be like, no matter what you do to your face, even if you use these filters, we'll be able to tell it's you, because if we have your face, we can run it through various things. Please don't listen to me, Google. You're probably already doing this. They're probably already doing this, which is like, we're feeding them our faces that are distorted in this way, connected to us, and they're still going to be able to tell who we are.
Yeah,
process of elimination.
but I mean, face recognition gets a lot of attention for obvious reasons, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's already like gait recognition technologies that can identify someone from the way they walk.
No.
The technology has actually been around for years. It just isn't, it doesn't get the face recognition, the attention face recognition does.
It's getting a little bit more because of smart city stuff, but not as much.
They can. There's all kinds of behavioral tics that can be easily analyzed and recorded by algorithms.
So I want to jump in here. Great conversation, and I think we're going to be talking about this for a long time. We've sort of touched on it, but in emphasizing the shiny and new, I think that's a piece of it, but I think it's even more about fear. And let me just tell you a story from the last 24 hours from my own neighborhood. So last night at about 6 in the evening, a man was shot in the back of the head at a fast food restaurant, shot and killed. He happened to be an off-duty sheriff. Within about 6 hours, there were photos all over, including verified by the newspapers, having come from the sheriffs, of the person who shot him in a neighborhood nearby, where he decided to change his clothes. He drove into a neighborhood and changed his outfit, and he did it right in front of a surveillance camera that was on somebody's house. It was described as a residential surveillance camera. They saw him, whoever owned that camera apparently saw it and gave it to the sheriffs, or the sheriffs went through the neighborhood and said, hey, can we see what's on your camera? I'm not sure exactly how it happened. But a very clear picture of this guy is now in the paper today, and he will almost certainly be caught because there's not only a picture from the Jack in the Box where he presumably committed the crime, but from this neighborhood where he's changing his clothes. So it's pretty hard then to go around my neighborhood now and say, you really shouldn't have a camera on your house because it's reinforcing prejudice, and you're going to put pictures of people with dark skins in next door, which people do, absolutely. That's a reality. But it's that's what we're fighting against when we say, no, there's all these issues of control and loss of freedom and loss of autonomy, which I'm totally sympathetic to. But I think that's the real argument that we're going to have to address, and it's going to take a lot of empathy and a lot of discussions with people who are going to go, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't really want the government taking my picture, but on the other hand, I don't want a killer walking loose in my neighborhood when a camera could potentially identify him and call the police for me.
That's the police spokesperson in the video that Martin showed. I mean, that's exactly what he said, is that while we understand everybody's concerns, we also are worried about safety, and this is about safety. And we made 2 arrests today, and so people are safer, and that's the big argument that they're going to make.
Yeah, and to touch on this though, and that's a difficult argument. Yeah, I'd say 2 things. One, I mean, safer for whom, right? Like it's not safer for me. Like it's not.
I hear you.
I mean, I have on a far lower scale, there were some kids in my neighborhood who were, I assume they were kids, who were egging cars. And one night they got mine, and my neighbor came over and said, well, I have the ring footage if you want it.
Wow.
You're kidding.
And no. And I was like, no, that's all right, dude. I came out with the white vinegar and washed my car off, But I mean, I hear what you're saying, Michael, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, but the problem with that argument and the problem that we face with so many of these technologies is safer for whom?
Yeah. I hear you. I think we have to keep having that conversation, but I don't think it's going to be easy.
No.
And
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say this was some of the stuff that I brought into my talk too, is that a lot of times in these spaces, and I don't want to say that, we shouldn't be talking about regulation and litigation. That needs to be a huge piece of this, but education needs to be a huge piece of this too, because I don't think, Michael, that people are able to have those critical conversations just yet, right? Because I feel like the fear and the safety becomes overwhelming at that point, and they're just like, oh yes, I want to be safe, and they just kind of opt into it without really thinking about it. And really getting students and faculty and people to just really kind of think about these things and ask critical questions around it is the piece I feel is sort of missing.
I also think that, you know, the thing that Chris and I did, the thing that Martin was doing, the films that we made and the stuff that Tim writes about, we tried to give like the other side of that story. So there's a safety story and then there's just like how it can go wrong. But the safety story is much more compelling to people. I think that as someone who very much believes in abolition, like abolishing the carceral state, a lot of these things are not actually addressing the actual social problem. Like people see the social problem as being someone's committing a crime rather than the social problem as being, why is the person compelled to commit that crime? What is driving them to a place where they think that's the thing they need to do? And so I think, and it's very easy to kind of focus the social problem on that being like your safety, right? Rather than what about like why this person is here? What brought them to
So like prevent the crime rather than catch the criminal.
Yeah, or prevent the get rid of the social situation in which someone
that's motivating the crime or allowing the crime to happen. Right.
Remember, this fear is, and this is a very obvious thing to say, but this fear is more fundamental and predates the technology, and it dictates a lot of behavior. This is why people voted for Trump. This is why people voted for Brexit. This is why people buy assault rifles and keep them in their houses. It's why people maintain the ridiculousness of the Second Amendment. You know, these are people are scared and they're fed this fear. You know, it's a scapegoating tactic. And the technology side of it is connected to that as anything. So it's something very fundamental in society that we need to address.
And one more thing I'll add, Amazon now is using instances like this to make commercials that they put on social media. So I mean, there's a very recent one where there was someone suspected of trying to break into a car. I mean, from what I can tell, they tried the handle on a car. And Amazon put that as an kind of advertisement for the Ring in neighborhoods, in Facebook accounts, like in that neighborhood, essentially. And then, you know, again, like Amazon's like not accountable to anybody, and they are partnering with police departments in some really messed up ways to increase this surveillance net.
I have been seeing that on YouTube as kind of as a almost 50-year-old white guy in rural Ohio. I have been seeing an ad on YouTube for a surveillance company. I mean, it's like the kind of thing that you'd expect to see on a Sunday news show about how we are helping Podunk, Ohio extend the reach of its 4-member police force by putting up cameras at every intersection. And look how much better, quicker we can respond to all those things you should be afraid of. And we have a pretty good sense of what most rural people are afraid of.
The line between this to like, you know, when you had to like report your neighbor to the Nazis, that's a very, you know, it's also like, it's weird when you talk about the kids egging the cars. I think kids should do that, and we should be like they should be pushing back against the system and doing that. And coming back to, I forget which one of you said this, but in education, like we want, you know, kids to be able to mess with that system. That's part of that growing up, right? You're supposed to hit up against authority and push it, and it's like I get annoyed with it, but that's my role, right? You know, it's my role to be like, hey kids, you're hurting me or whatever, and it's the kids' role to be like, fuck you, I'm gonna do
I don't know, you know, but like I said earlier, we're staring climate change in the face. I think egging a car's the least.
Well, I live in an area.
We should be like dismantling these cars completely. So.
I live in an area that's a large Muslim Arab population, right? Like I'm not calling the cops on anyone who's egging your car.
So much of this is just about monetization. I mean, who's making a profit when they do this, and how are they using fear as a way to make that profit?
So I'm thinking that we're going to be holding you from the next sessions in the afternoon. I think we're
Yeah.
so do you have any final, like, what's the big takeaway for you from domains that you take back with you?
Surveillance is bad.
I'm glad you had to go to domains, Chris, to figure that out.
Oh, don't even get into that. Don't.
That's the most controversial.
Yeah. Everything else, you could be some weird Canadian pinko, but they will run you right. They will take you to the state line.
I also want to say, I think one of the things, and that's something that I think both Chris and I try to do in our thing, and Martin kind of did not do, and a couple of other people, is that all of us, especially because most or not all of us are educators, and I think we're trying to be good, and we genuinely want to teach well and do all these things well within the context of our specific institutions and technological realities. And despite that, we are going to fail because the larger systems are designed to control and surveil and do all of that. So I might be a great teacher that wants to use this amazing tool to do really great stuff with my students and help them with digital literacy and understanding stuff and doing all this stuff. But in doing so, I'm not actually helping. If that makes sense.
No, that does make
like, and that's what I mean. Like, we all mean well, we're all coming from a good place, but we're still forced to use these things that are designed for something completely else.
And there's two ways of
Even domain of one's own in itself.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much so. And I think everybody here is kind of, they get that. And I really appreciate the group here in a big way because they're practitioners and they understand those limits of that technology and the stuff that they're doing while still trying to do good work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think it's true. Yeah.
I would say that I was at 2017, and this year's conference is probably a step up. There's just so many really good presentations. There's just not enough time. I wish I could go to all of them. It's really been great in that respect.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you so much for taking time.
Fine.
Hi, Themba. Bye, Themba.
Bye, Matt.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Michael. Bye, Maha. Bye, Helen.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. So I can continue the broadcast and we can continue conversation, or we can stop and just have conversation off camera.
I can stay for like 5 more minutes.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll stop broadcast and then we can just have a quick debrief.